If you love movies, you're in the right place, and that place is here at the Chronicle Official Film Podcast for the People's Movies. Welcome back, and welcome to the latest episode, which is episode 63 of the podcast. My name is Paul. I am your host, as well as the editor of the People's Movies. Thank you for join me for this fine episode. This is the spot I usually introduce the the co-hosts, the writers that will be joining me on the episode. But for this new episode, due to the times that we're recording, we were unable to actually them all to be here with me at one time. So we've got two reviews. The first review is going to be The Evil Dead Burn, and reviewing that with myself will be Nick, and a big welcome to Fear, who's one of the writers at the website. And then the second review is going to be the live action version of Moana, and that's going to be Rosie and myself. So that is going to be Evil Dead Burn and Moana. For the first review of episode 63 of the Chronicle Podcast, we're going to review Evil Dead, and I'd like to welcome back Nick and a big hello to Fear. How are you guys?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Thanks.
That's great, and welcome Fear to your first podcast, hopefully many more. So, Nick, would you like to just tell us what the Evil Dead Burn is about, and if you liked it or didn't like it?
Yeah, sure, I'll start. So I think anyone who's watching this sort of knows what to expect from an Evil Dead film now, but just in terms of the plot, I think this one gets the action going quicker than a lot of the other ones in the series. Picking up from the previous film, the words in the book get read almost immediately, and then we're immediately kicked into this like family drama of like there's four friends. There's Alice, and who's played by Souheila Yacoub, who's amazing. She's her husband Will. They have an argument, and he drives off in a rage, and bumps into a recently reanimated deadite who says quite ominously, like, take me back to your family," or something like that. And then the rest of the film goes from this guy's funeral, and the family are all gathered in this house, and that sort of becomes the center of the film, where the Book of the Dead and the Deadites sort of gravitate towards that. And there's no end to the amount of like gore and nasty deaths and stuff that come after that. So yeah, that's generally the film. Thea, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think that's a good summary pretty much. Yeah, I'd say it's a lot of gore in this one. It's
Yeah,
like it's brutal. And yeah, I think it's kind of it is what you expect from an Evil Dead film, and that is, that's a compliment.
I would say for me, it's like from an Evil Dead film, what you want is like it's a sort of you want a mix of like gore and fun. And I think this one definitely delivers on the gore front, but I I didn't find it very fun for most of it. And I was like, especially as it went on, I was like, it was getting very nasty. And I think the director, I haven't written down the director's name, but like he directed Infested, which is like another really nasty film, and it's like it feels like it's really leaning into the sort of French New Extremity sort of genre of film rather than sort of Evil Dead. Like so something like I don't know, like Martyrs or
Frontiers.
Frontiers or Switchblade Romance or something like that, more than a traditional Evil Dead film. Which I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's sort of the impression that I came away with at least. Any more thoughts?
Evil Dead Burn is my first biggest horror disappointment of this year. I'm a fan of the franchise and have been since day one. As I've mentioned on this podcast, and I've also mentioned on the People's Movies, I'm of a certain age, so I'm old enough to remember the Sam Raimi films. I never saw them in the cinema because I was young at that time, and obviously, as we know, the originals are considered video nasties. And back in the 80s, everyone knew someone who knew someone or knew a shop or someone who could get one of the video nasties and some of the pirated version of films. I remember seeing E.T. On before it came to the cinema. You always knew someone. And back to sort of this year, we've had Obsession, Hawcom, Backrooms, even 28. years later, the Bone Temple, and you could even say, I haven't seen it yet, but I know fair reviews and that. Sam Raimi's own Sent Out. It's been a great year, for horror. In the previous film, The Evil Dead Rise, which I reviewed on an earlier episode of the podcast, just have a look. That divided audiences, and it took it for that sort of cabin in the woods environment and into a sort of urban sprawl of a sort of rainy, I think it was Los Angeles, if I remember rightly. And like this, the new version, it took the viewers into some very uncomfortable places. And Rise had less of the sort of Sam Raimi trademark humour. It did have some of the humour, but what I think it did, the Rise did, which I don't think this does as much, it took the franchise into it added to the lore, and at the end, before spoiling too much if anyone hasn't seen it, it took the viewers down a sort of Lovecraftian nightmarish rabbit hole. And as I said, I think Evil Dead Burn is sort of devoid of many of the sort of franchise traits that made the Evil Dead such a cult film. Don't get me wrong. By the way, it's Sébastien Vaniček.
So yes, that's
Yeah, as the director, he did get things right, and what he did do is he sort of delivered something that was very unhinged. It was vicious entry to the franchise. The sort of the gore tiptoes sort of back into the sort of the sort of effects. It take you into that sort of video nasties, and you're right what you said, Nick, into the sort of French extremity. I mean, the list is endless there as well. It really embraced the sort of video nasty's aesthetic, taking things to an extreme. I've wrote down here in my notes, legally pushing, because I think there was a scene, I don't know which scene exactly it's been cut, but apparently there's a scene that the director said get cut because
I feel that.
yeah, in America, folks, if you may be American, listen, you understand the NC-17. It's such a difficult rating system. There's a lot of ifs and buts compared to like here in the UK, which is a bit more straightforward, though we do get a bit confused in certain things that can be in it. The other thing about it is the effects were apparently practical instead of going for that sort of endless manipulation, that sometimes we get in a lot of films here, and you sort of felt every cut, every slice and dish and severance, and it sort of pushed you. It tried to push you to sort of emotional levels that the characters were feeling. And another thing that I liked about it is cinematography. It was very dynamic, it was very rapid. The cinematographer, I think it was Philip
Yeah, I was
Lozano.
saying.
Yeah, it does tease every sort of fast moving iconic camera work that we saw in the legendary Rami films, and it tries to take it to another level. But there is some examples of, however, as we know in that sort of the fast moving part lead to certain scenes like in the original Evil Dead and even the Fede Alvarez version. It leads you to the iconic, very heavy tree scene, and then obviously in the last film, Rise, it was in the lift. It was very kinetic, very chaotic, very experimental. And as you said, it was seen in Evanescence Infested, with the spiders and that. A lot of long unbroken shots at times, you truly feel the walls pushing into you, and you feel that sort of claustrophobia and the pain as well. Obviously, the car scene is one point right at the beginning, and near the end of the film. Folks, sometimes we, as I'll say in every episode, and I'll say in future episodes, occasionally there is a spoiler, but sometimes we don't do it deliberately. So apologies if we do. So there's the car scene and the bathroom scene. They're good examples of that.
I
I'll
thought
let one of you guys take over here. I'm sort of took over there, so one of you want to continue there.
I think going back to what you just said, I think I think it's one of the best shot films in the series by quite a way. I really, especially I really loved the sort of pre-credit sequence by the lake. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah.
And just that one little effect of like the guy when he crawls out and the skin just comes off his hand. That was like, I was like, okay, this is gonna be good because I felt like that was a really nice like horrible effect. and her head, like the zombie's head, like coming out of the water was like really creepy. So I really enjoyed that side of things. But I feel like the editing was just a little, and also what you said about the sort of Sam Raimi, the sort of because he had the sort of all the Dutch angles in the
Yeah,
first two, didn't he? And I feel there's a sort of reference to that in this one. In the bathroom, there's a really nice bit where the camera just sort of is constantly like going on, it's like moving from right angle to right angle, basically just constantly spinning around as following the characters as they roll around the ceiling, which I thought was really cool. But I thought the editing was like really choppy in places, like to the point where like sort of geographically in the scene I couldn't tell who was where, it was so
yeah,
like it was so frenetic. So that took me out of it a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I genuinely thought it was just a bit much. And there's a bit at the end, I think all the stuff in the house was pretty good. I think the Evil Dead like is traditionally like is a mix of like comedy and horror, isn't it? And
yeah,
like I think there was some comedy in this, but the problem was I would say like sort of 90% of the comedy was in the first sort of third of the film, like before they go back to the house. Like there's that guy in the mortuary who's like just there for comic relief, and he does that weird dance that seems like completely out of place. And then like and then in the house it's all very, very grim. And that didn't 100% work for me. And on top of that, there's the sort of I know the mythology and the sort of lore of Evil Dead has always been quite sort of loose and like in terms of like it's not the same as like a zombie film where you get bitten and you turn into a zombie. There's like a lot. It seems a lot more debatable, what ambiguous sorry, what makes you a zombie. But in this, it's the whole addition of the sort of dagger that they're looking for just seemed a little bit too, for me at least, it seemed a little bit too sort of traditionally sort of horror. Do you know what I mean? Like not as irreverent as it
yeah.
normally is. But yeah, what did you think, Thea?
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of the things you're saying. Yeah, I think the bit in the house is definitely kind of the strongest part. And I think definitely the prologue I thought was really awesome. The kind of, yeah, before the credits, in the lake with the kind of all the fish hooks and everything. That was like kind of like the tree in the first one. I liked that reference a lot. I thought it was really cool. And that entire kind of section I found really interesting. And the Jessica going to the car and then him hitting Jessica. It was all very interesting at the start. And then yeah, I think as you said, as it kind of went down this dagger route, I was a bit thinking, I'm not sure if anyone really cares about that part. And it didn't feel that compelling. And I think especially towards the end when I don't know if this is spoiler free or if not. But there's a second kind of the third act is almost split into two. And I just found that we got to the kind of almost fourth act, I suppose, the kind of coda of it. It was too late in the story to be bringing in this aspect that you'd known it was going to come in the whole time, but it just felt far too late in the story and it became quite overly convoluted at that point. And I thought, we've had the whole film by this point, and then bringing in another character again, it just felt like it got a bit messy towards the end. And I definitely agree about the editing style. It was too much.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean about the end. And like again, don't want to spoil anything, but like the fact that it was the sort of the big bad was this sort of it just sort of got it was sort of a zombie that had got like vecnored up, and it was basically like a skeleton at the end,
I
and
thought of Vecna as well.
yeah, and it's sort of I don't know. I'm not like a huge gore hound or anything like that, and I'm also I don't get that. I can watch a horror film and I enjoy a horror film, and like Evil Dead films for me is like there has to be like it has to be like gushy like the horror. There has to be like sludge and guts and stuff. And if it's just a skeleton, you're sort of losing some of that. Like I remember like the visceral like horrible feeling of like the Fede Alvarez remake when like the main girl picks up the chainsaw at the end and just goes to town on the
Mm.
bad guys and how horrific it is. And it's like you don't get that effect with like what's essentially a skeleton. And like it just felt like you said, it felt a little bit it was a little bit tacked on and I didn't really feel like that it added that much the end bit. Once they left the house, I was like, okay, we're done. And then it's like, oh no, we're not done. Um, and yeah, and the fact they have to find that dagger, and that's what supposedly kills them. It's like that's never happened. That's never been a thing, has it? Unless I've just missed that.
I'm not really sure, but I think there was a little bit of comedy moment in him, and Alice finally gets to the place where the dagger may be, and she tries out a few daggers, and they kept saying, "No, that's not working. That's not it. That's not." And then she finally does get it. So going back to the sort of overhead views thing, yeah, there was a few bits that it did work, but Evil Dead's not like your sort of Fast and Furious sort of uh, car action thriller, or some sort of alien ant film, where they're looking down on people. Well, it was in a way. So, but the bit in the house definitely it did work. The sort of colour scheme you could argue did work as well. The colours that they used were very much the genre. The sort of cold and muted colours to the really picked up the sort of brutality and grimminess of where they actually were. As in the fires, apparently, allegedly, they were real fires. A bit like Infested, Vaniček, you actually used real, majority of the time, close up, used several real spiders. Obviously, there'll be a lot of digital in that. So it makes me think, a lot of the sort of fire side of things may have not actually worked as much. Excuse me, the house part was definitely the part it worked the best in the whole film. But see, soon as Alice escaped the confines, the price went up, home, it was like the scene after that. I felt it was like the director just found a rejected scene off the editing suite of James Cameron, because she gets to that sort of factory or workplace. It was like she was like Sarah Connor getting chased by, you said Wagner, whatever his name is. I was thinking more of the T-1000 in Arnie, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she's escaping because the end, what happens to the thing it's chasing, that made me think of the sort of Terminator type thing as well. Have you ever noticed this? If you're watching like a crime thriller, all the criminals have got the cheapest looking phones in the world. No, your flip over ones that everyone had at one point, and cost about £5 or £10 nowadays. Or Tony Stark had one of them, and all the technology they could have. For a wealthy family, that house was disgusting in state. But however, I could understand why they did it, because it sets up the sort of cold car feeling. I was thinking when I saw it, I was waiting to see Anthony Perkins come in there, with Psycho or something like that. That's the sort of feeling I was getting. The place was so run down. And I don't know what you guys thought of that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. It was sorry, going into the plot again. It'd been left to the younger brother, right? And he'd
Yeah.
let it get in that state. That's because the parents had a go at him for that. I guess maybe he just wasn't living there. Like
Yeah.
maybe he was living with his girlfriend or something. So they just
Oh,
hadn't been
true.
looking after. I will
True.
say I thought that he was a bit underdeveloped. I thought
Yeah.
there's a point early on where like he makes a choice and it's sort of it's not it doesn't reflect well on his character. I'm trying not to do spoilers. It's like it makes him seem like a bit like a proper like coward. But again, going back to the editing, I wasn't sure if we were meant to take that away from that, or if I just missed something in a shot. So it's not until it gets brought up later that I was like, oh right, yeah, no, he did leave that character. So like I don't know, I felt he was a little bit underdeveloped, and the whole resolution with him, although it's an amazing like there's an amazing like one where like the main character Alice is like escaping through the house while there's this huge fight going on in the background. I thought that looked great, but it did sort of negate his character's like arc a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Is that okay? Is that make sense without spoiling anything?
No, it
Yeah,
does.
I totally agree with that. I thought the same. In the first kind of act of the film, I think it was a little unclear even. I knew Alice was the main character from kind of the trailers, but he had quite a lot to do in the first act. So I kind of thought that they would be perhaps, more working together or towards the end, or I don't know. I thought he would have a bigger role. And as you said, they did kind of start to give him interesting character aspects in the first part. And then did you just kind of abandon that? And I did, yeah, I kind of thought, I see, we're just moving on from that then. It did feel like they added that in for then no resolution, and it made it a bit pointless to have that aspect of his personality.
I guess you could say his arc he gets wrapped up a bit early on with the whole dishwasher bit, but
Mm.
which, using a dishwasher door as a method of killing someone twice is pretty good. There's two ways of doing it in the film. And yeah, I don't know. I thought I thought in general all the actors were all the performances were really solid. Everyone in the house anyway. I thought the dad was really creepy. Um, and yeah, yeah, so the actress who played so that was Joseph, who's Hunter Doohan is the guy we're talking about. The actress who plays his partner is Lucienne Buchanan, I think it is. She was really good. Both sides of her performance I thought were really, really well done. She starts off as like the most reasonable person in there in there, and yeah, I thought that was really, really well done. But yeah, I don't know, that it just seems it was so choppy that at the end I wasn't sure. Yeah, there's points where I wasn't sure what was supposed to be whose side I was supposed to be on in some of the arguments and stuff. But I thought Souheila Yacoub was really, really, a good protagonist.
I mean, Evil Dead Burn was an ambitious film, but this is where I'm going to say where it gets disappointing. With the style and the ambition, you need more. You need more substance, and this is what I think was very mediocre as well. Don't get me wrong, the sort of technical elements and that they don't make things great. You need to develop the characters, the stories we've all been mentioning here. And the film's themes, I think the director he falls too deep into the rabbit hole of the themes of the film, and he gets a bit lost. Because do you know what? I didn't feel this was an Evil Dead movie I was watching. I mean, it's all about the sort of intergenerational family relationships and the sort of toxicity it comes from, and the abuse, the ignorance, and sort of mental and physical side of things that obviously Alice, the trauma, gets, and obviously with the brother as well. And this is where the thing you were mentioning, Nick, about the acid from it for the brother who was seen as a coward. It's the sort of toxic masculinity. Obviously, Will, who's the husband of Alice, you can see for him and their father. Also, that's where it all comes from. It's very hereditary as well. I just find, as I said, you want to appreciate and understand the sort of pain that they're going through and that, and the mentality. But I think he's forgotten it's an Evil Dead film we're watching here, and you want to understand that pain and what the characters are experiencing that. But sometimes what we got was something very exhausting, and it needed some of the classic tropes in there. It made the franchise such a cult as well. You don't get a chance to sort of gather your thoughts from it. It's non-stop, and as I said, I didn't feel I was watching an Evil Dead film as well, and I agree with you said about the sort of new French extremity.
Yeah,
Folks,
there's points where I was like, I completely get what you mean about it not really feeling like an Evil Dead film.
yeah.
So it's like that. I think there are points that I really liked about it, but like it doesn't. The bits I liked didn't feel like they belonged in that sort of film. Like even the Wire, like which is amazing, doesn't really doesn't really feel like it belongs for me anyway. But I did like there was stuff in there that I liked. It wasn't. I don't think it was a complete failure. I just didn't. It just wasn't entirely for me, I don't think.
What about you, Fia?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I don't know, it felt like an Evil Dead film to me, but not the original ones. It felt like to me it did feel in line with the past two.
Hmm.
Not super similar. It definitely has kind of its own differences. And I think I was more excited for it because of Evil Dead Rise, which I didn't actually love that much, but I think like Paul said earlier that it went in kind of a different direction a bit with the lore and everything. And I really liked that it was in an apartment with the earthquake and just kind of random differences that were more interesting. So I was quite disappointed when this one was, oh, it's Cabin in the Woods again. which is fine because it's on brand. But I thought it might maybe they might just try a few different locations or settings or just something that maybe felt a little different to the others. But I did think it felt to me quite similar to the 2013 one, maybe
Yeah.
just less maybe less just effective possibly, but I think it felt in line with this kind of new trilogy that we've got going. But I prefer the original trilogy. So I did find that I kind of was thinking, oh, I wish they'd do Army of Darkness again, but I don't feel like they will.
So let's sum things up. So let's give it, if everyone wants to give their sort of final thoughts and then give a rating. Who wants to go ahead?
Yeah, so I think overall, I thought it was a pretty enjoyable film, but kind of it's not one I'd be thinking about afterwards. It was a kind of it's a good addition to the franchise. I think there's lots of things to enjoy about it, and technically it's very strong. The camera works great. It looks really cool. Like the Deadites look great, but story-wise and character-wise, it wasn't the strongest entry. And I think it definitely didn't end in any way that kind of impressed me particularly. It was a little bit too familiar in that they were kind of trying to just use almost stereotypes of the genre without actually engaging with them properly. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I felt about it. And I would give it a 3 out of 5 stars.
3 out of 5. And Fear, you did the review for the People's Movies. So, folks, head over to the website after you listen to this and you get Fear's full review. And for you, Nick, what did you think? Final
Uh,
thoughts?
Yeah, very, very, very similar. Like, going back to what Thea said, like, I think I was actually the opposite. I was looking forward to it being sort of going back to being in the woods again. But I feel like with Evil Dead Rise, I feel like it felt a little, it made sense for it to be in an apartment block, whereas this felt a little bit more contrived, getting them all in the house and stuff elements of it a lot more. I quite more than you, Paul. Anyway, I quite liked the sort of the abuse and the trauma and the grief side of things. Uh, I wasn't that impressed with the use of like lore, which felt different from other films like the going back to the dagger and stuff. But yeah, like you said, technically definitely one of the better ones. I think it looks amazing. And see it on balance, I think I'd give it a 3 as well.
For me, I agree with you, Nick, on the sort of characters. I felt they were very underdeveloped. Sort of exposition thing, they felt they just dumped it. A bit like the dad eating the mashed potato on the scene, on the dinner plate. It just made the themes feel really unbalanced in that, and the narrative felt rushed, and you don't really get a chance to say, yeah, that character deserved that, that character deserved that, because everyone's so rushed. So as I said, it didn't feel like an Evil Dead movie and such. There was a few little Easter eggs in there. There's one as the granny's going up the stairs. There was something hanging on the wall. I don't know if you noticed that there. There was one up there, and then I think there's another scene with the grass cutter as well. I think that might have gone back to the classic tropes. But it had ambition, and what
Oh, I
we
should
got,
say as well, the bit that oh sorry. The bit that scared me the most was there's a shot with the bed sheet in the background. That was
yes,
the scary bit for me.
yeah,
No, the gore there. It was just that one little moment. But yeah.
yeah. What we got was something I think was a missed opportunity, but it was very messy. It was a bit of a nasty slog as well, and it was full undeveloped characters. I'm a bit worried about under Evil Dead Wrath because they are using another new director here. But Evil Dead Burn, I feel it was a bit of a numbing letdown and my most disappointing horror so far of this year. So I gave it 2 stars, folks. So, folks, it's a 3 star and a 2 star for this film for Evil Dead. So before we go, Nick and Thea, thank you very much for joining us here. As you won't be in the next review, I'm going to ask you to share out where they can find your work online or in print. So, Thea, would you like to go first, please?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. It's at cinnamama_.
And Nick?
You can find me on Instagram as well. I'm IMD Bartlett. Also still on Twitter or X. And yeah, I write for the film. I write for People's Movies, obviously, but also Film Hounds and Movie Web. You can. I recently did a feature on people's movies about Hammer horror that I would recommend people listen to if they like, or recommend people read if they like horror.
Yeah. Yep, they certainly go and read that. That was something I mentioned in a previous episode that me and Nick were on. So you have it, folks. That is The Evil Dead Burn. And for our final review of episode 63 of the Chronicle Podcast is going to be the live action Moana. And joining me for this review is Rosie. How are you, Rosie?
Good, yeah.
Okay, so Rosie, would you like to, if people don't really know what the film's about, just say a few things about what Moana is about, Disney Moana, and if you liked it or didn't like it?
Yeah, so this is a adaptation of the animated film which came out in 2016, so only 10 years ago actually. And it is virtually a scene for scene recreation. So nothing's changed. So if you've seen the original, you'll know exactly what happens in this one really. But in the original, it's Moana. She's been chosen by the ocean to restore the heart of Te Fiti because her island is losing all its crops and the fish, and they have no food anymore. So she seeks out the demigod Maui to help her on a voyage to go and restore the heart of Te Fiti and save her people. The music's exactly the same. I think there's a new original song, but that's not until the credits of the film. So everything is very, very similar to the original, except it's not as bright and colourful, unfortunately. I think there's been a few comparisons, and I wrote in my review, I wrote the review for the website, that there are some still really visually stunning scenes. There's been a lot of complaints about how it looks, and I don't think it's the ugliest film to ever exist. There are some really gorgeous scenes, but I think it's more when it plays with light and darkness, the nighttime scenes, and the scene in Shiny with the giant crab in his jaws. So I think those are the ones that look really nice on screen, but when you're looking at the comparison of her in the ocean and her on the islands, there's like barely any color to it. It's very dull, very beigey colored. And when you're thinking about Hawaii, you don't think of those colors. You think of beautiful greens and blues, and that hasn't translated at all very well to the screen. And one of the biggest scenes in both films is when they restore the heart of Te Fiti, and she grows back, and she's all the flowers and the colors and the grass grows and everything, and it just looks so bland in this new adaptation. So it is really sad that it has translated like that when you've got, I know that you're never going to be able to recreate the beautiful colors of an animation, but you could at least get a little bit closer. There's a color grading can be done. So I do think that was a shame. And also I felt like this was very low energy compared to the original. Again, I know that it's difficult to act exactly as an animated character, which, they can do things that none of us could do. I mean, no god is turning into like birds and sharks and things, so there was CGI involved. But I think that if you look at any of the dancing scenes, and I love a good musical number, there's like barely any movement. I put on Letterboxd, I said it's like the nonchalant version of the original film. There's no excitement to it. It just feels very scene for scene recreation and very low energy, quite boring almost in some elements, which is sad, especially when you already know the original story. There's nothing to keep you gripped really. So those are my main issues with it.
Do you think it's just a cash grab, this? Because what was the last one? It wasn't Snow White. It was the one with the little animated creature. I forget the name of it. Forgive me. And I actually
I
did
think
quite.
Snow White was fairly recent. Since then Lilo and Stitch.
Yeah, Lilo and Stitch. Yeah, I think that sounds like that's been a bit of a savior for Disney because Snow White was very divisive. Regardless if you agreed or disagreed with the actress that played Snow White said, whatever you do on social media, if people think you're woke or not woke, it doesn't really matter. You do not come out and criticize something because that's you destroying whatever you're about to promote. Compared to I think that had a lot of things that I mentioned which shouldn't have been involved in a Disney movie or even thought about in the same sentence. How was this compared to as you said, it's a like for like. So obviously, the Snow White tried to do things different, and railed a lot of people.
Yeah.
The wrong word. How does this one compare to that sort of thing? I know it's
Well, I think I mentioned that in my review as well, is that I think that there's no wrong in changing certain aspects. One of
yeah,
my favorite live actions is The Little Mermaid, and The Little Mermaid was my favorite Disney princess when I was younger too. And to see the adaptation of that on live action, what they'd added was so much more story and personality to each characters.
yeah,
And they added so much more character to Prince Eric. They added a few more songs, and I thought that, you've added some really good stuff that has made this more fulfilling, like in my opinion anyway. I know not everyone agrees. Snow White, I didn't have any issues with the changes in Snow White. I thought, it was let down by the evil queen. I thought that was the least interesting part, and maybe some
yeah,
of the costume. But I'm a big fan of Rachel Zegler, so I'm not gonna dismiss anything that she's done. I think she did the best that she could, and I think when she went round on these press tours and what everyone was so mad at her about was probably what she'd been told to say by Disney. They probably said to her, we're doing this fresh retelling, like we're going to change these bits, because it has been a conversation for years before the
yeah,
live action of Snow White came out that, should we be kissing people who are unconscious
yeah,
in a coffin? Like, should we be doing stuff like that? And I know there's like the whole question of consent, and I'm not going to delve
yeah.
into that,
No,
but it was
no,
a conversation that people had before the film was made, and probably why Disney made those changes. They'd heard the outcry, but I think they then saw that people were mad at those changes. So then when it came to Moana, they stuck very closely to it.
yeah,
But I do think as well, a lot of the remakes that we've had, they're very old Disney films. Snow
yeah,
White is over 80 years old. So they're obviously not going to be the same political correctness as
yeah.
we have now. Whereas Moana was really not made very long ago. There's not much that really needs to be changed. And I think, like, when with some of these films, they're fresh retellings. We're retelling stories from older generations to newer generations. But with Moana, like, it is still kind of a film of this generation. The sequel only came out less than 2 years ago, and they've announced a third of those films already.
Wow,
And they're filming Tangled right now as well, and that was really not that long ago either.
that's right.
So I think when you're changing things, like you're making films like even Lilo and Stitch, Snow White, The Little Mermaid, they're all older generation Disney films, and they make sense. But Moana, just like I again put in my review, I think it needs a decade at least before it
Yeah,
got readapted, because it really, like, I still remember very clearly me watching Moana in the cinema. I know it was 10 years ago, but I like remember where I was, like which cinema I was, how I felt about it. It's not anything old that needs like those new feelings that are associated to it.
yeah,
But I think we've also had it's interesting because we've had films like Cruella and Maleficent, and they're retelling the old stories but from a different perspective. And I think those are probably the best done adaptations, because it's the same story but it's different. And you probably couldn't tell Moana from someone else's perspective. There's no like massive clear villain or anything like that. I think it's interesting to do something different with a story. And we all went and watched Moana, and we felt like there was nothing new for us to like enjoy. We knew exactly what happened, so nothing felt particularly gripping. You know that they're going to defeat this monster in this cave, and that this song is coming next, and exactly how it ends. So there's no excitement or anything with it unless you haven't seen the original, I think. And I think for those people that haven't seen it, they probably will enjoy it a lot more than those that kind of grew up watching it as well.
as in series films. I believe a lot of the time they're doing it, obviously, is to update these movies, and I think it's also just to keep their hands on the rights to the classic stories. So a lot of people forget. Yeah, Disney may have made them, but the rights actually belong to people like the people own the estate of like Hans Christian
Yeah.
Andersen. Because a lot of these classic stories come from these pages of the books. It's a bit like the Marvel movies. A lot of them, they'll make this really dodgy one-off series in Disney Plus or something really, really bad just to keep hold of that franchise. and obviously we know with Disney, with Marvel at the moment, it's getting to a point where they need to stop for a while and get a few years and that. Do you think with the actual classic Disney films that they want to make into animated films? Sorry, the animated films they want to make into live action features. Do you think they should maybe just step back a little bit and maybe try and bring out some original stories? Or is this a sign of Disney and all the companies that now are part of the Disney family? Have they dried out originality? And this is why they're going back and redoing some of these stories? Or is it just the fact that right, Moana's was such a popular animated film? Let's try and when some of the old magic's still here, let's try and jump aboard and deliver something else. That's how I think maybe we Toy Story 5, where it's sort of slipped a little bit, it's not delivering something it hasn't been done before, apart from using a different character. But what they're doing is they're using the same template, the same story. Do you think that's maybe something that they're doing here? I really don't know. Have they actually said what maybe the next sort of live action Disney film? I'm
So
not sure.
they're filming Tangled at the moment.
Yes, sorry.
And I thought that was going to go on hold because when Snow White performed so poorly,
Yeah,
it was in the news that Disney was going to kind of take a step back on live action films.
yeah,
But then I think they'd already had Lilo and Stitch was in pre-production. I don't know whether Moana was or not at that time, but it was obviously in the works. And so they continued. And then Tangled was originally going to be cast a lot earlier than it was. And they put that on hold for a bit. And I thought, we're not going to be seeing that for a while. And now I've seen photos of them building the tower.
yeah.
So I think, unfortunately, from what I've seen so far of just the sets of Tangled, it is a bit worrying. And Tangled is such a beloved Disney film that if they do that wrong, people are going to be mad. And I mean, Moana, like, it's just come out that it was one of Disney's lowest live action box office opening weekends. It made about 43 million on a 250 million budget. So it's obviously not performing very well. And if this continues, then I think it's going to make them have a think about, whether it's worth it or not. And I think, like, it's a shame. And it's because the quality of them have been going down to a certain extent. I know before even Snow White happened and all the things said, people weren't even happy with the costuming. They weren't happy with how it looked. Same with Moana. Like, there's a lot of conversations about how it looks on screen. And I think there's a debate, like, does it need to be done? And I mean, How to Train Your Dragon, that wasn't Disney, but that was done recently. And again, that was scene for scene. And when it is such an exact copy, is it necessary? Because they're not old films, so you're not really retelling it for a newer generation yet.
Yeah.
Like any kid now could still go back and get on Disney Plus and watch the original. So I think it is an interesting thing to whether Disney will continue to do it. I think they have been relying a lot on remakes and sequels recently, and the sequels do still do fairly well. I think Toy Story has the nostalgia factor.
Yeah.
They're doing another Frozen film, and I think that will do well. I actually think Frozen 2 is better than the first one anyway. Moana 2 wasn't great. I don't know how it did, but I didn't enjoy it as much. But I think they do rely heavily on it. But then we've seen recently a lot of from other film companies that there are original films that are doing well. Less so, I guess, kid related. We've had things like Sinners, Obsession. I guess a lot in the horror genre, really. You've got Weapons as well.
Yeah.
But it shows that there is hunger for independent films, but people just need to, not independent films, but like original films.
Yeah.
And people need to show up for them. I mean, Disney have still released, original films as much as they can be original, and people just aren't as interested in them. And I think that's where we need to, if I see people beg all the time, like, we want more original films, stop doing sequels, stop doing this, but then there's no interest in them because there's no pre-existing IP and people have no stakes held in them. I went to see The Little Mermaid live action because I loved that so much as a kid that I was there at the first screening on opening day. So I had pre-existing interest in the film, whereas I think you've got to work a lot harder to get people grasped by an original film, and I think that's maybe where Disney struggle a bit as well.
So do you think, obviously we'll go back, Dwayne The Rock Johnson's hairdo
Hmm.
is Moana's Gal Gadot's Snow White singing? It's that
Yeah,
bad? Sorry.
I because he obviously did voice Maui in the original film.
Yeah.
His singing was like fairly good, you know. I think Lin-Manuel Miranda, he's a genius. He can create some brilliant songs. It's probably one of the reasons I love Moana so much, the
Yeah.
original, because and same with White Encanto did so well. But I did, and I think like I wrote in my review, I think this felt like a bit of a vanity project for Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah.
I think, you know, you voiced the character in Moana 1 and 2, you'll probably voice him in 3 as well. You know, why don't you let someone else have the chance to portray that character in a live action form? You know, other people, like not all the original cast returned. He was one of the only ones.
Yeah.
Some of them were like producers on the film, but I think it seemed like a kind of, he thought it maybe make him easy money. He obviously has some, like, he obviously does enjoy the film. Like I see him on the press tour and he looks like he's having the time of his life. But when I was watching those scenes, and I thought, just because you voiced him doesn't mean you can play him in a live action format. And it's a shame because I have no hatred for the guy. Like,
Yeah.
I think he seems like a decent guy, but his performance just seemed, it was all very much like, I think he just did it for the sake of doing it and maybe for a bit of the vanity. And it just, I think someone else could have done it better. I think there was a lack of chemistry between the two, unfortunately. And I don't think that's any fault of hers. And I just, yeah, I'm watching it. I just felt like there was no energy there with it. It was all just there for the sake of it. And the singing's like okay. I know there's a lot of comments about the wig, and I think it's odd to see a guy that you've seen bald basically your whole life to see him with a long, flowy,
Yeah.
luscious looking wig. I just don't think he was necessary for the film, and I think it would have been nice to see someone else in that role. And Disney does quite well with giving newer actors chances in live actions, and same with the casting of Tangled. You know, they're like known actors, but they're not like A-list, B-list even. They're just like you're newer to the scene actors, and it's really nice to see them get the chance, whether it does well or not. Whereas, like, you know, he's had plenty of chances. He does a lot of blockbusters. He could have still like made money from that film without even being in it. So I do like wonder why he decided that he felt like he must be in that role.
I think it was maybe a lot to do with that MMA movie he did with Emily Blunt. That
Mm,
they thought that should have been an awards winner,
yeah,
but I think it virtually get none. I haven't seen that film.
I haven't
Uh,
either.
no, and for some reason it does not appeal to me. But I'm, as I've mentioned before, I'm of the age where I'm going to be frank. I like the wrestling, and
Mm,
I am of the age of when The Rock or Dwayne Johnson, the Attitude Era. That this is when he was at his best, you know.
mm,
But it wasn't the family friendly era of the WWE. So there's a lot of gossip that he may go back to WWE in a couple of weeks. There's start of August or SummerSlam, which is sort of like the one of the, I think it's like the Super Bowl of WWE wrestling,
mm.
the type of event, and he's might be going back to be what they call the final boss. Any wrestling fans that are listening, they'll know what I mean with the final boss as well. So, as in the young actress, forgive me her name, I believe she was sixth. I was listening to an interview when I go to work and come back from work. I listen to a podcast. Christopher Cale, I think it is the guy who works. Is he the director? But he also works with Miranda. He's worked with Miranda in quite a few of the films he's been in. He was saying the actress who became Moana, 32,000 people entered to get that
Mm.
role, and she got it. And I believe she was 16 at the day she got it, and obviously I think she's
Yeah,
19 now. How was she?
19 now. Yeah,
How was she in
she
this?
She was good. So her name's like Catherine Lagaea, and her dad was actually in Star Wars. I found out today.
Ah,
Um, so she's not the first actor in the family, but she was good. I think this is her film debut. Like she hasn't been in
yeah,
anything, at least anything that's on her IMDb page or anything like that before. Um, I think she had a very like stubbornness to Moana that I think she was a stubborn character anyway, but there's more of a like she's quite a strong-willed character in this version. Like I think you see a lot more she plays her a bit more blunt, I guess. And I think that is like a character choice, but it just didn't quite work with Dwayne Johnson, and I feel like that's probably not her fault.
Yeah.
I put in my review, I said she did the best that she could, really, with what she was given. Her voice is stunning, like singing voice, like absolutely stunning. I would be interested to see whether she does do more after this, like how it goes on from this, because there is only so much you can do with a pre-existing character. You can't completely redefine her, and it would be interesting to see if she does go on to do more stuff, depending how this film does and how reviews go. But she did like pretty well. I wouldn't say that it's like a standout performance or I thought she was absolutely amazing, but she was pretty good.
So let's just trim this up. What is your final thoughts? I know you've given a rating on your People's Movies review. Just for any of the listeners that may have not read the review, if you want to sort of sum up and then just give a rating.
Yeah, so I gave it 2 stars out of 5, which was quite painful to do. I think I really wanted to enjoy it because I do enjoy Moana so much. And I think there is a element where you enjoy a story. You know, I enjoyed the original story so much that I can't completely hate on this new version because it is that exact same story, which is a blessing and a curse for it. I think a lot of people will come out of it and enjoy it because they did enjoy that story. But the thing is, it was a bit lackluster for me, and you know, it felt very low energy, not beautifully like colored, and it just felt like it was missing something, and that's why I just couldn't give it more than 2. I was really umming and ahhing between a 2 and a 3. But the more I think about it, you know, I think there's so much that could have been done, and I know it's hard to fully translate an animated film to a live action, but if you're going to do it, then you should do it well, and it just wasn't done well. It felt like maybe if they spent a bit more time on it, you know, if they spent more time color grading and, you know, working on it and added maybe a little something to it, it could have been great. Like I don't know how long it took them, and I know that probably other people did enjoy it. I'm not going to sit here and say don't go watch it, but if you do love the original, I can't see this topping it. I don't think it will be better at all. So that's why I had to stick with 2 in the end.
So that's 2 stars. So Rosie, as I explained to the guys who I reviewed Evil Dead Burn with, this is some episode, Evil Dead Burn in Moana.
Bit of whiplash.
Yes, yes, we cater for all the family here. Because we've recorded at different times, I know at the end we usually, I let the writers let the listeners know where they can find your work online or on print. So we're just doing it now. So if you just like to also just let the listeners know where they can find any work that you've did online or in print.
Yeah, so you can find all my socials. They're Rosie Reviews X, TikTok, Instagram, Letterboxd, and also my website, rosiereviews.uk. And then you can also find my writing on the People's Movies, including the Moana review.
Thank you very much. So that is Moana live action, and Rosie gives it 2 stars. That's your wrap, folks. That is your episode 63 of the Chronicle. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much to Studio Canal and Disney for letting us review their movies. Both Evil Dead Burn and Moana live action are now out in UK cinemas and Irish cinemas too, and other cinemas around the world. Please check your local listings to find out when and where it will be near you. A big thanks to Nick, Fia and Rosie for joining me for the reviews. And one way you can follow the Chronicle on the People's Movies is follow us on Instagram, which is seems to be our sort of main HQ. That's at the People's Movies. We also post over at the People's Movies. That's at Facebook, X and Twitter at the People's Movie. We're also on YouTube at the People's Movies.com. You will find episodes of the Chronicle over there, but along with other reviews, interviews, views and features and trailers and posts. So get yourself over there as well. You can also find the Chronicle on many of the popular sites to download your favourite podcasts, such as Apple, Podbean, which is our sort of main HQ for the Chronicle, Spotify, Amazon Music to YouTube, to name a few. Sometimes we might continue to chat over on social at the Chronicle Take 2. Stay tuned on social media or over at the People's Movies to learn about future episodes. One way you can learn about them is sign up for the email newsletter over at the website. That will keep you posted not on updates, not just in future episodes, but what we also do at the website. You can also show your support for the Chronicle and the People's Movies with Buy Me a Coffee and at PayPal. You will find the links at the website. Do share this podcast on social media with your friends and family. And if you're listening to us in one of those popular podcast sites, please do give us a rating. We are a very small podcast, and you sharing, rating, liking it does help more people find the podcast. So once again, a big thank you to Nick, Fia and Rosie for joining me, and to yourself for joining me. Until the next time, enjoy the movies.